There are rules we all learn growing up. But then, there are the unspoken rules, the ones that are never written down, but you can feel them as soon as you walk into a room. These are the rules that shape how people perceive you before you even open your mouth. Most people don't even realize they're doing it, but everything you do, even without saying anything, speaks volumes. Every time you speak, every gesture you make, every little reaction you have, you're revealing something about yourself. You're either in control of the room or you're letting it control you. And here's the harsh truth. It's not about what you show others, it's about what you choose not to show. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They trained themselves to be still in chaos, to stay silent in noisy situations, and to remain unreadable in moments of conflict. Not because they were hiding their weaknesses, but because they were embodying strength that didn't need approval from others. In a world where everyone overshares, overreacts, and overspeaks, true power comes from restraint. Real power lies in knowing that your composure, not the volume of your voice, is what creates real presence. Today, we're diving into 9 public mistakes that can strip you of your respect and how to avoid them if you want to keep your energy, hold your space, and move through life with quiet confidence. If you've ever walked away from a conversation or a situation thinking, "I gave away too much," or "Why did I let that bother me?" this one is for you. And if you're someone on a path of personal growth, focusing on real self-mastery, not ego or noise, then this might be exactly what you need to hear. If that sounds like you, consider subscribing and following along, because every step you take to strengthen your mind and sharpen your presence brings you closer to the person you are meant to become. So, let's get started. 1. Don't complain out loud. Have you ever noticed how the calmest people in public often seem to command the most respect? It's not just because they dress well or speak with confidence. There's something deeper, something in their energy. They're quiet, composed, and unmoved by whatever storm is swirling around them. They don't overshare. They don't broadcast their burdens. One of the biggest things they avoid doing? Complaining out loud. That might sound harsh at first, right? After all, we're all human. We get frustrated, tired, and overwhelmed. Venting can feel like a release, and sometimes it seems like we're just being honest or keeping it real. But in public, that release comes with a cost, one you might not even realize. Complaining tells the world, "I'm overwhelmed, and I want you to carry this burden with me." Even if you don't say those words outright, that's the underlying message every time you complain. And people pick up on it, even if they smile or nod along. Something shifts. You're no longer the grounded person in the room. You become the one who's leaking emotional energy. The Stoics had a term for this, pathos, destructive emotion. They weren't saying that you should never feel anything. What they were saying was that emotions, especially the painful ones, should be processed internally, not broadcasted to everyone around you. Marcus Aurelius said it best, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. This is what public restraint is all about. Not bottling everything up, but learning to master your inner world so that you no longer feel the need to perform your pain for others. The truth is, complaining may get you some sympathy, but it will never earn you respect. If you're trying to live with intention and build a reputation that lasts, your respect is far more valuable than any momentary relief from frustration. Here's a deeper layer to this idea. When you complain in public, you train yourself to look outward for relief. You teach your mind that discomfort has to be witnessed to be real. But real strength, the kind that builds resilience, comes from being able to sit with discomfort quietly, understanding it, even honoring it, without needing to show it to the world. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." Complaining is often just an avoidance tactic, a distraction from the deeper conversation happening inside us. When we air our frustrations too easily, we rob ourselves of the chance to learn what they're really trying to teach us. I'm not saying you should never talk about your struggles. There's a difference between vulnerability shared with intention and reactive complaining. When you're with someone you trust, in a space of reflection or healing, that's different. That's sacred. But when you're in public, surrounded by people who aren't invested in your growth, what does venting really do? Who does it serve? Most of the time, it just creates noise. It dilutes your presence. It makes you forget who you are. Public complaining makes you smaller in the eyes of others, not because you're weak, but because you gave away your composure. In a world where everyone is addicted to reacting, composure is rare. And rarity is magnetic. Think about the people you admire, the ones who seem to move through life with quiet authority. They're not perfect. They're not emotionless. But they have a kind of presence that doesn't get shaken easily. That presence isn't some natural trait. It's discipline. It's self-awareness. It's what Stoicism teaches us, to control ourselves, not the world. To choose how we respond, especially when things don't go our way. Complaining is a reaction, and reactions are often the easiest way to deal with discomfort. What requires real effort is to pause, breathe, and say, "This is hard, but I'll carry it without collapsing in front of others." That is true strength. Enns once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." Complaining, on the other hand, signals that you've forgotten your why, that you've been pulled into a surface-level reaction, not rooted in purpose. When you lose sight of your why, it's easy to slip into victimhood. You start narrating your life from a place of lack. Public complaints feed that loop. They convince your mind that you're always under attack, always stuck. And that mindset doesn't just shape how others see you, it shapes how you see yourself. So, what do you do instead? You endure in silence. You let your stillness build weight. You walk into a room with a calm that's so steady, people feel it before you even speak. When chaos hits, you don't flinch. You don't narrate it out loud. You contain it. You alchemize it. And eventually, people begin to wonder, how do they stay so steady? What do they know that I don't? That's the mystery. That's the power. You earn it not by being louder, but by being stiller. 2. Don't expose your insecurities. Have you ever caught yourself saying something like, "I'm probably going to mess this up," or "I'm not the best at this, sorry," right before doing something in front of others? It seems small, harmless, maybe even like you're just being honest or trying to manage expectations. But what's really happening in those moments is something much deeper. Without realizing it, you're shaping how others see you, and even more concerning, how you see yourself. Every time you speak your insecurities out loud in public, you're not just expressing doubt. You're building a narrative that says, "I don't trust myself, and maybe you shouldn't either." The more you do this, the more you start to believe that narrative as truth. Epictetus said it best. If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, "He was ignorant of my other faults." It's the kind of dry humor Stoics were known for, but it carries a powerful message. The point is simple: don't rush to defend yourself or diminish your worth. Hold your ground. When you declare your flaws before anyone even notices them, you rob yourself of the power of presence. The kind of presence that says, "I know who I am, and I don't need your permission to be here." The truth is, everyone has insecurities. Everyone, even the people who seem completely put together, have doubts swirling beneath the surface. The difference is some people carry their insecurities silently while others hand them out like flyers on the street. But here's the thing. When you speak your insecurity aloud, especially in public, you give it life. You invite people to measure you by that one moment of self-doubt. And not everyone watching is kind. Some will remember your words and use them as the lens through which they view everything you do from that point on. Not because they're cruel, but because people are naturally influenced by what you tell them about yourself. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When you voice your insecurities without thinking, you're allowing your unconscious fears to lead the way. You're reacting, not reflecting. And in doing so, you're surrendering your sense of direction to passing emotion. Stoicism teaches the opposite. It teaches us to observe our emotions without being controlled by them, to choose our responses with intention. So if insecurity comes up, and it will, the question becomes, do you broadcast it or do you contain it long enough to learn from it? Let's be clear, this isn't about pretending to be perfect. It's not about faking confidence or putting on a mask. It's about owning your space even when you don't have all the answers. It's about speaking and acting from a place of quiet strength rather than visible doubt. There's something powerful about someone who doesn't flinch when they're uncertain. Someone who can say, "Let's figure it out," instead of, I probably can't do this. That kind of mindset doesn't just shift how people see you, it changes how you walk through the world. There's a quiet confidence in restraint, a kind of dignity that shows up when you hold your worries close instead of spilling them everywhere. 3. Don't announce your plans. Have you ever felt that rush of excitement after coming up with a new idea, a goal, or a plan? You can't wait to tell someone. You imagine their reaction, their encouragement, maybe even their admiration. You haven't even started the journey yet, but just saying it out loud makes it feel like progress. But here's where most people get stuck. We mistake talking about our dreams for actually doing the work. We confuse being seen for being in motion. The truth is, telling people your plans doesn't move you forward. It just opens you up to doubt, distraction, and unnecessary pressure. In fact, it gives others a clear view of what you're building, and not everyone watching wants you to succeed. From a Stoic point of view, this is exactly the kind of emotional impulse that needs to be kept in check. Epictetus reminded us, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. What he meant was, while you're building something real, others might not understand or even notice. And that's not just okay, it's necessary. The Stoics were deeply committed to action over appearance. They weren't concerned with applause. They were concerned with integrity, doing the work quietly and thoroughly, regardless of whether anyone was watching. Real commitment doesn't need a stage. It just needs direction. There's also a psychological angle here. Carl Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. When we constantly talk about our goals to others, we end up outsourcing our motivation. We make our vision dependent on their reaction instead of our own clarity. And when the applause doesn't come, or worse, when we face skepticism or subtle doubt, it plants seeds of uncertainty in our mind. Suddenly, we're questioning our ability, our timing, our worth. Not because our plan is wrong, but because we handed it to the wrong audience too early. It's not about hiding your progress. It's about protecting what's still growing. Think of your goals like seeds. You don't dig them up and show them to people every few days to prove they're real. You plant them, water them, and let the roots do their work underground. And when the time is right, the results will speak for themselves. That's what builds credibility, not declarations or promises, but consistent, quiet progress. You don't need to explain what you're building when people can see it. Once your plans are out in the open, they become targets. Not everyone around you is rooting for your growth. Some people carry envy quietly. Some carry fear. Some are so committed to their own stagnation that your movement threatens them. Announcing your next big step gives them time to prepare resistance, whether through criticism, competition, or subtle sabotage. Why give them the map? Let them find out when it's too late to interfere. Seneca once wrote, "The greatest blessings of mankind are within us and within our reach. A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not." This is the spirit behind silent progress. Not needing validation, not craving permission, just walking your path with focus, building brick by brick while the world sleeps on you. And when they finally look up, they won't just hear about your vision, they'll stand inside it. For don't pick sides in petty drama. It's so easy to get pulled into other people's chaos. Someone throws a verbal jab, someone else fires back, and suddenly the energy in the room shifts. You can feel the tension building, and before you know it, someone's looking at you, waiting for your support, your validation, your allegiance. The pressure kicks in. Do I back them up? Do I speak out? Do I take a stand? But here's what most people miss. Getting involved in petty drama might feel like loyalty, but it's often just emotional gambling. You might win one person's approval, sure. But what you don't see is the quiet damage that happens in the background. Others are watching, recalculating how they see you. And many of them will quietly walk away without ever saying a word. Stoicism teaches us that it's not our job to react to every disruption around us. Marcus Aurelius said, "You always own the option of having no opinion." That doesn't mean you don't care. It means you value your peace more than proving a point. It's understanding that energy is finite, and giving it to arguments that don't concern your purpose is like pouring water into a sieve. The Stoic doesn't run from conflict, but they choose it wisely. Not every disagreement deserves your name attached to it. Not every clash needs your flag planted in the middle. When you jump into petty fights, you're not just speaking, you're signaling. You're showing people what rattles you, what moves you, and most dangerously, what divides your loyalty. And if you do it in public, the effects last even longer. It's like writing your emotional reaction on a wall for everyone to interpret. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." In other words, when something triggers us deeply, it's worth asking, is this really about them or something unresolved in me? Sometimes, the fight we want to enter has nothing to do with principle and everything to do with unexamined emotion. There's strength in stillness, in watching, not reacting. When someone else is caught in a spiral of frustration or offense, you don't have to match their intensity to show you care. You can remain calm and still be loyal. You can choose to observe and still be present. The key is knowing your role. Imagine you're in an arena. They're throwing punches in the ring. You're not the referee. You're not the opponent. You're sitting in the stands, drinking water, memorizing every move, because you understand something powerful. Information is leverage and emotional control is a weapon. Seneca wrote, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence." When you hold your tongue while everyone else is shouting, you stand out, not because you're passive, but because you're poised. People begin to notice that you don't get dragged into the noise. They start to trust your judgment. And more importantly, they start to think twice before trying to manipulate your attention. Because you're not predictable. You're not reactive. You're deliberate. 5. Don't chase attention. There's a quiet power in the person who doesn't need to be the center of attention. You've seen them. They walk into a room, say very little, but somehow everyone feels their presence. They don't chase eyes, they don't speak over others, and they certainly don't try to dominate the moment. They're just there, grounded. While others are reaching for validation, they remain still. And strangely, that stillness pulls people in. Because something about not needing attention ends up commanding it. It's not a coincidence. It's the natural gravity of self-possession. The more you try to be seen, the more invisible you become. People can sense when you're reaching. They may laugh, they may smile, but deep down, something feels off. It feels like performance, not presence. The Stoics believed that dignity was found in self-control, not spectacle. Epictetus said, "If you seek truth, you will not seek victory by dishonest means." And attention, if it's chased, often becomes just that, dishonest. Not because you're lying, but because you're not moving from your center. You're bending yourself into what you think will be liked, applauded, or accepted. And that's not power. That's dependency. When your self-worth is tied to how much noise you can make, you become fragile. Because the moment people stop clapping, you don't know who you are anymore. There's something psychologically draining about constantly trying to impress. It wears you down even when it works. Carl Jung once noted, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But you can't become that person if you're constantly performing for approval. The more you contort yourself for attention, the further you drift from authenticity. And when you lose touch with authenticity, it's not just others who sense it, you feel it too. You leave a gathering feeling empty, like you gave everything and still weren't really seen. That's the curse of chasing validation. It gives just enough to keep you hooked, but never enough to make you whole. Now, this doesn't mean you should shrink or silence yourself. It's not about being passive. It's about being intentional. There's a huge difference between expressing yourself naturally and trying to dominate the spotlight. The person who speaks when they have something to say, not just something to prove, carries a different weight. Their words stick. Their presence lingers because they're not trying to win the moment. They're simply being who they are. That kind of consistency builds respect. Not immediately, maybe, but steadily. Over time, people begin to look to you, not because you asked for it, but because you earned it. Seneca once said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." The subtext is clear: choose your circles wisely. If the people around you reward noise over depth, you'll eventually start performing just to keep up. But if you surround yourself with people who value calm, truth, and substance, you'll feel no pressure to compete for attention. You'll speak when it matters. You'll listen more. And ironically, you'll be noticed more because you'll be rare. In a culture that rewards volume and speed, slowness and stillness have become magnetic. When everyone else is pushing to be the loudest, the most impressive, the most remembered, your job is to become the most real. Be the one who doesn't need constant validation, the one who knows they're valuable whether or not anyone claps. And that's not always easy. We're wired to seek approval. It feels good to be liked, to be acknowledged. But the deeper work is learning to be respected. And that starts with not chasing the crowd, but holding your center. The Stoics weren't flashy. They didn't walk into the forums trying to steal attention. They walked in with purpose, with calm, and with an inner strength that didn't need to be shouted to be felt. That's what modern strength looks like too. You don't need to be the loudest. You need to be the one people turn to when the room gets noisy. You need to be the anchor when others are drifting. And anchors don't move fast. They don't shout. They hold. 6. Don't crack under pressure. Pressure doesn't announce itself with sirens. It shows up in the everyday moments. When someone interrupts you mid-sentence, when your idea is dismissed in a meeting, when a stranger cuts you off in traffic, or when someone challenges your character in front of others. In those moments, something shifts inside you. Your heart starts to race, your breath shortens, and before you can think, your body begins to betray you. A slight flinch, a sigh, a subtle tightening in your voice. The shift might be small, but it's powerful because what most people don't realize is this. Pressure doesn't have to break you to reveal you. It just has to expose you. And most of us, without knowing it, give ourselves away through the smallest leaks. The Stoics taught that control begins where emotion ends. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." What he meant is simple. It's not what happens to you that creates pressure. It's how you interpret it. In moments of tension, we either become the calm in the storm or we become part of the storm. But staying calm doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. It means owning them. You don't let your face twitch, your voice shake, or your posture fold just because things aren't going your way. That's not about being robotic. It's about being anchored. Carl Jung once said, "Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness." And the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. The same goes for pressure. You don't become strong by avoiding it. You become strong by moving through it without losing yourself in the process. The way to do that is by mastering your energy, your expression, and your response. The world is watching, not just for what you say, but for what you reveal in silence. A tense expression can say more than a full sentence. A shift in body language can speak louder than your defense. People don't always judge your logic. They judge your composure. It's tempting to respond quickly when challenged, to explain, to justify, to match the other person's energy. But the moment you match their panic, you give up the frame. You confirm the pressure. You let them steer your behavior. The Stoics believed that strength is best shown in restraint, not in being passive, but in choosing to respond, not react. You see, people don't just hear what you say. They feel your vibe. If your energy shifts every time someone challenges you, then people won't follow your words. They'll follow your flinches. That's why the person who remains calm under stress becomes magnetic. Not because they dominate the room with volume, but because their stillness becomes a mirror. Others start to notice their own emotional chaos reflected back at them. And suddenly, the calm person holds the power, not by force, but by presence. It's hard to rattle someone who doesn't respond to provocation. And once people realize they can't shake you, they start to adjust around you. But this takes practice. It's not a performance you put on when things go wrong. It's a discipline you build before the pressure shows up. It starts with breath, with posture, with learning how to pause. Not to stall, but to choose your next move with clarity. When someone challenges you, instead of tightening up or pushing back, breathe slower. Let the moment pass through you instead of gripping onto it. You're not ignoring what's happening, you're just refusing to be ruled by it. 7. Don't over-explain yourself. It's a familiar feeling. Someone questions your decision, your behavior, your tone, and before you can stop yourself, you're already halfway into an explanation. You start breaking it down, justifying, clarifying, hoping that if you just say it right, they'll understand. They'll see your intention. They'll agree. But here's the thing. The more you explain, the more it sounds like you're not sure of yourself. The more words you throw at them, the more power you hand over. Suddenly, it's no longer about your decision. It's about their interpretation of it. You've lost the frame. You're no longer leading the moment, you're reacting to it. And people can feel that shift, even if they don't say anything. Confidence leaks, and doubt enters the room, and just like that, you've made your truth negotiable. The Stoics would remind us that not everything requires a defense. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." His point was simple: act with clarity, then move on. If you know your motives are clean and your decision is rooted in principle or logic, why dilute that strength with over-explanation? People who are centered don't rush to prove themselves. They understand that not everyone is going to understand them, and that's okay. What matters is not convincing the room. What matters is staying grounded in your own reasoning. Carl Jung once said, "The healthy man does not torture others. Generally, it is the tortured who turn into torturers." Often, the ones pressing you for an explanation aren't looking for clarity, they're looking for control. They want to make you second-guess yourself so they can feel more certain about their own worldview. That pressure to explain can come dressed up as concern or curiosity, but underneath it, there's usually a subtle attempt to shake your foundation. And if your first instinct is to explain, then you've already stepped into their frame. Now you're performing for them instead of standing in your truth. There's power in restraint. When someone pushes you to explain yourself, and you simply respond with, "That's just how I chose to do it," or even a calm shrug, you maintain the frame. You communicate that you're not afraid of being misunderstood. And strangely, that calm refusal to over-justify makes people lean in. They want to know more. They replay the moment. They wonder what you're thinking. Because mystery is magnetic. The more you hold, the more others are drawn in. You don't need to give them a full map of your reasoning. You just need to walk your path like you know exactly where you're going. Seneca said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In this context, that means don't mirror the energy of someone trying to rattle you. If they come at you with rapid questions, accusations, or disbelief, don't meet them with panic. Don't try to outtalk their doubt. That just puts you in a loop where you're reacting to their every move. Instead, slow down. Stay composed. Let your stillness be the thing they have to wrestle with. When you stop trying to be understood, you force others to confront their own assumptions. And often, that's far more impactful than any explanation you could offer. Of course, there are moments when communication matters, when clarity is needed. But that's different from defending your every move like you're on trial. The difference is intention. Are you sharing because it brings understanding or because you're afraid of judgment? Are you offering insight or trying to win approval? Most people don't realize how often they explain themselves just to feel safe, to avoid the discomfort of being misunderstood. But here's the uncomfortable truth: being misunderstood isn't a threat. It's part of being human. And trying to control how others see you is a game you'll never win. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That includes changing how we react to pressure, how we respond when someone tries to challenge our choices. Instead of scrambling to explain, we can learn to pause, to trust that who we are and what we stand for doesn't need to be defended every time it's questioned. That kind of internal stability doesn't just protect your peace. It transforms how others treat you. You don't have to explain your whole story to everyone who asks. You don't have to unpack your every move for public approval. Sometimes the most powerful sentence is the one you don't say. The calm reply, the shrug, the silence that says, "I'm good with my choice, whether or not you get it." That's not arrogance. That's self-respect. That's the Stoic way. 8. Don't show bitterness toward rejection. Rejection doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes, it's a quiet moment, an unanswered message, an invite that never comes, a door that quietly closes while no one's looking. And no matter how mature or grounded we try to be, it stings. Not because we need approval, but because deep down, we all want to be seen, chosen, and valued. That's human. But what matters most isn't the rejection itself. It's what you do next. Do you let it harden you? Do you let it twist into bitterness and sarcasm? Or do you rise steady and unshaken, choosing grace over reaction? The truth is, the way we respond to being overlooked says more about us than the rejection ever could. When you respond with coldness or pettiness, it may feel like power in the moment, but what you're really doing is confirming your hurt. You're signaling that this got to you, and that gives the other person or the situation more power than it deserves. The Stoics were clear about this. Marcus Aurelius said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." He wasn't denying that rejection hurts. He was reminding us that pain becomes suffering when we hold on to it, replay it, or perform it for others to see. Carl Jung offered a similar insight from a psychological perspective when he said, "What you resist persists." That bitterness we try to hide? It shows up anyway, in our tone, our posture, our words. It leaks out when we talk about people who ignored us, or when we pretend we don't care but keep bringing it up. The more we resist the feeling, the more power it has over us. But if we can meet rejection with quiet detachment, we take that power back. Not by pretending we don't feel anything, but by choosing not to perform it. By allowing ourselves to process it privately and then moving forward with intention. There's a certain strength in the person who can be overlooked and still walk with dignity. Not to prove a point, not to manipulate the narrative, but because they genuinely believe that rejection isn't the end of their story. It's just a redirection, a clearing. When someone doesn't choose you, whether in friendship, opportunity, or love, they're not defining your value. They're just revealing their preferences. And that has more to do with them than it does with you. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." That applies to attention and validation too. Craving recognition, chasing closure, or trying to make someone regret rejecting you, that's scarcity. That's clinging. But when you let go without bitterness, when you walk away with your peace intact, you become rare. People notice, maybe not immediately, but eventually they feel the absence of your energy. And because you didn't try to prove your worth, they start to wonder if they missed something valuable. That's the quiet power of detachment. It creates curiosity where desperation would have pushed people further away. But here's the catch. None of this works if it's just a tactic. You can't fake grace. You can't pretend to be unbothered while secretly holding on to resentment. True stillness comes from genuinely accepting that not everything or everyone is meant to be part of your path. And that's okay. In fact, it's necessary. The Stoics believed that the universe was guided by reason, that things happen as they should, and our job is to align with that flow, not resist it. Epictetus said, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and your life will go smoothly." That mindset doesn't eliminate disappointment, but it makes you more resilient, more fluid, less controlled by who chooses you, and more anchored in who you've chosen to become. Rejection, when you really think about it, is just information. It tells you what's not meant for you. It clears space for what is, and often it saves you from something that wouldn't have supported your growth. But that clarity only comes when you detach from the emotional noise. The part of you that wants to explain, to prove, to be seen. Instead, let your absence speak. Let your silence make the statement. You don't need to announce that you've moved on. Just move differently. Focus on your craft. Pour your energy into places that reciprocate. Be so grounded in your worth that the loss isn't yours, it's theirs. 9. Don't criticize those above you in public. There's always a temptation when someone in a position of power gets it wrong, when they're careless, dishonest, or just plain out of touch. You see the cracks in their character, the inconsistencies in their words, the weight of their influence being misused. And it's easy to think, someone has to say something. Maybe you think, I'll be the one to call it out. Because it feels noble, courageous, like standing up to power is always the right thing to do. But in practice, it's more complicated. Speaking truth too early, too publicly, or too emotionally can cost more than it earns. You may be right. You may be honest. But if the room isn't ready to hear it, they won't see bravery, they'll see bitterness. And just like that, your message gets buried under the shadow of your delivery. The Stoics were no strangers to injustice. They lived in times when emperors could end lives with a gesture, when public opinion could flip overnight. And yet they were remarkably restrained with their judgments. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In other words, don't let someone else's misuse of power push you into misusing your voice. Reacting out of ego or wounded pride only adds more noise to a space that already struggles with clarity. And public criticism, especially of someone above you, is rarely just about truth. It's about timing, leverage, and control. Carl Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." This hits hard when we want to call someone out. It reminds us to pause and look inward. Are we pointing fingers because we're centered or because we're triggered? Because when your criticism comes from a place of unresolved emotion, it doesn't matter how accurate it is. It still feels personal. And personal attacks, especially against people in power, tend to backfire. Not because the target is blameless, but because people respect composure more than confrontation. There's also the question of gain. What's the outcome you're really hoping for? A change in behavior? A shift in public awareness? A correction of injustice? Those are worthy goals, but they rarely come from a single outburst. They come from sustained clarity, strategy, and influence earned over time. When you criticize someone publicly, especially someone who holds more status, what you say becomes less important than how you say it. And once the audience detects bitterness or sarcasm, they stop listening to your message and start judging your character. That's the risk. Not just being unheard, but being misunderstood. Waiting doesn't mean you're afraid. It means you understand the value of patience. When people are watching, when trust is fragile, and when power is on the line, what you don't say can be even more powerful than what you do. Let others burn their energy pointing fingers too early. Let them fight shadows while you gather light. And when the truth finally stands clear, when others see what you saw all along, you won't need to shout. You'll simply speak, and people will listen because your silence gave your words weight. This isn't about being passive. It's about being precise. There's a difference. You're not avoiding the truth. You're choosing when it's most effective to speak it. The Stoics would call that discipline. Modern minds might call it emotional intelligence. Either way, it's the ability to hold fire without throwing it, to observe without becoming entangled. That kind of composure doesn't just protect you. It earns you quiet influence. Over time, people will notice that you don't attack. You move intentionally. You don't stir drama. You study it. You don't speak to be heard. You speak to be remembered. In a world that's always pulling you to react, to prove, to perform, remember this. The strongest presence is the one that doesn't need to shout. True power is quiet. It's calm. It's deeply rooted in who you are, not in what others think of you. So, protect your energy, move with intention, and let your silence carry the weight your words don't need.